Before we get started, one quick note. Down below, I've got this $ curly braces process.env parks API key. So in the last video, we had our API key here, and I mentioned not pushing that up to GitHub because you don't want to have your secrets out in a publicly available space. So with Next, what you can do is create this .env.local, create your variable name, parks API key, and then equals whatever the key is. Notice that it's not a string or anything, it's just the straight key. And then what we can do is reference that key here, process.env.parks API key. And so that's how you'll make sure to keep your secrets secret, because in the git ignore, you'll notice that all of these env files are ignored and will not be pushed up to GitHub. Hey, welcome back. In the last video, we got our initial setup with our Parks API and with Tailwind. In this video, we're going to take the next step and start designing our homepage with Tailwind. So to do this, we're going to do some custom Tailwind setup with our Tailwind config. We're also going to be utilizing some open source fonts and imagery. So let's go ahead and get started. Looking at our project here, we're just pulling in the one park for now, and this was just to kind of get our setup started. We're actually going to tweak our Axios call here a little bit. So instead of just using one park code to grab one park, we're going to actually grab all of our parks. So here we can just get rid of the park code. We have our API key. We can change this to parks since that'll be more reflective of what the data actually is. And then going back up to parks. And then we can console log our parks. And then this will give us an error since this Acadia object no longer exists. But let's check out what we have got. So refresh the page. If I open up the console, I've got my object, there's my data, and there's 50 different items or locations from the National Park Service API. So you'll notice here, it's an array of 50, and it stops at B. So the National Park Service API here, if you go to this parks endpoint, it actually does have 497 different items, but the limit defaults to 50. So if we want to get all of them, we need to up that limit to 497 or just round it off to 500. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. We're going to be using a drop-down menu to populate some of our individual park links, but for now, just something to keep in mind. So we've got my next park. Let's start doing a little bit more Tailwind customization. So in our main tag above the header, we're going to put a nav. This is just going to be a really simple nav. We just want to have a way for users to get back to the home page if and when they visit an individual parks page. So at the top, we are going to import link from next link. From there, inside of our nav, we're going to do link with an href of / for our home page. And then inside of there, we need an anchor tag with our text, which will be my next park. Flip back over, and there it is. Okay, so we want to center this up. You can put it wherever you want, but I like it in the center. So we'll add some classes. So for our nav, we're going to make this have a border bottom of 2. We're going to use border green 700. We're going to make it fixed so it stays stuck to the top. Align our text to the center. give it a full width, a padding vertical of 4, so PY is up and down padding, and then a background color of white. So there's our navigation. Now we want to do, the cursor is helpful, but sometimes you like to have a little visual cue as well, that there's something going on with this that makes it clickable. So in addition to the cursor, on our anchor, we're going to add some classes as well. So class name, we're going to do text green 700. And then here's something cool with Tailwind. So this is setting the initial text, but you can also do inline transitions. So on hover, we want the text to be green 900, which is just like a darker green. We're going to transition the colors. So transition colors, this class name applies the transition property to background color, to text color. And then we want to set the duration. We'll do, why don't we do 300. So this will be a subtle little thing, but you can see the color is now different, and if I hover over it, it gets slightly darker. It might be tough to see on my screen, but if you're doing it on yours and coding along, it should be a little bit easier to see on yours. And you can, of course, play with those colors as well. So that's our simple navigation. Don't need anything too complex for now. And now for our header for this kind of top hero banner section. So we already have My Next Park here as a link. So maybe we can come up with some sort of different tagline, I guess. So let's try find your next adventure. The idea behind this little site is that people can search through different national parks and get some inspiration for traveling. Next, we're going to create a div, and this is going to be, it's going to take up the full width. So we'll set width full, and we'll give it a display flex. So what we're going to be doing here is we're gonna split this whole section in half. On one, on the top middle, we'll have our tagline. On the left half, we're gonna have a little card with a drop down that's gonna allow you to select your parks. And then on the right side, we'll have a little image. So let's get that going. So this is our container here. Then we're going to create our left half div. And this class name, we'll give it a display flex, flex column, items center. This one will take up 1/2 of the width of the parent. So this div takes up 1/2 of this div's width. And since this is full, this should take up half the screen. Next, we are going to create a little drop down. So for this, we'll have label choose a park. And then we'll create our select. And for now, let's go ahead and do parks.data.map. We'll grab each individual park and the park's index. And then we'll return an option with the key. Each park has an ID if you look at that object of data. So we'll just grab the ID since that'll be a unique string. We're going to give it a value for now of the index. and then we'll do park dot full name. Let's take a look. All right, so we're getting some national parks. It's not looking great so far, but we are populating our data with the different options. So that's a good start. Something cool with Tailwind is they have this components section. So they have some examples of how they would set up things like form components, cards. So if we look at forms and we scroll down, they have a good one for a custom select tag. If you want to just grab this from here, but I'm going to type mine in. So flipping back to the park and into our code. So on our select tag, we'll give it a class name. We'll give it display block with a width of 64. And all the numbers, so padding and width and height and those sorts of things, when it's a number like this, if you just divide it by 4, that's how many rems it is. So width 64 is equal to 16 rem. If you did, for example, width 4, this would be equal to 1 rem. So just something that keep in mind. We'll give it margin X of auto side to side so that it centers up. A background of white. A border thickness of 2 pixels. A border color of gray 700, which is kind of a nice dark gray. Text gray 700. Padding vertically or up and down of 3. Padding horizontally of 4. We'll change the border to be gray 500, so it's a little bit lighter when we focus. Let's take a look. All right, that's looking a little bit better. It's got a border, it's got some harder edges and everything. So this is looking pretty good. So next thing we want to do is, the purpose of this is going to be to select your park, and then we're going to have a little button that populates with the link to our page. So if we click, for example, Alcatraz Island, and we click on go, that would take us to the individual Alcatraz Island page, which we are going to be setting up. So let's flip back. Underneath our select, we'll have a link with an href. We're going to do curly braces and then backticks. So we're going to link to parks / and then we're going to reference something that we have not yet created. So follow along, and then I'll explain what's happening, and we'll get this this piece of state set up. So selected .title .replace all, double quotes with a space in between, and then a comma, double quotes with a dash in between, and then dot to lower case and close that off, put our anchor tag, and do let's go. All right, so what's happening here? Our link has a route to /parks/ whatever our selected title is. So the idea is that we're going to reference the value of whatever option is selected, and we are going to maintain that state in a variable or in a piece of state called selected. Selected will be an object that's going to have a title and an image that we're going to be using a little bit later as well. So let's get this set up. If we scroll up, at the top, we're going to import use state from React. Let's get this fixed. Okay, import use state from React. Then we'll do const park index and set park index, and we'll use this initial state of 0. And this is just going to keep track of, remember how we had 50 different parks come in? This is just going to reference the index so we can keep track of each individual park. And then we're going to have this selected object. So selected and set selected is equal to use state, and it'll be equal to an object where our image is initially set to parks.data at 0, the first item in that data array, dot images at 0 dot URL. So if you look back at your parks data object, you'll see that there is an images array, and some parks have, like 10 images, some have just 2 or 3. So we'll just grab that first image, and you can play around with this as well, but we're just going to grab the first one each time. And then the title is going to be set to parks.data at 0 dot full name. All right, so let's take a look at what is happening here. If we go back, okay, let's go, I capitalized that. If you hover over this though, if you see in the bottom left, I'm not sure if I can zoom in on that, I cannot. But if you're following along and you hover over let's go, in the bottom left you can see localhost 3000 /parks/ Abraham Lincoln Birthplace National Historical Park. So what we're doing is we are grabbing the title from the park, because remember this is set to the data at 0 dot full name. So we're grabbing the full name of the park and then just turning it into a usable URL. So if we took the full name, it would have capital letters, it would have spaces. So what we're doing here with this replace all is we're finding all of the spaces in the title and we're replacing them with dashes, and then we're lowercasing them just to make it look a little bit more consistent across the board. Let's fix this let's go thing here. So we do have some styles to apply to our link here to make it look a little bit more like a button. So we'll have our class name. We'll do width 24. We'll do display block so we can center it with MX Auto. We'll give it a margin top 4. Border of 2. Padding vertically of 2. We'll give it a rounded borders. Border green 700. Background green 700. Then when we hover on it, we want the background to be white. We're going to initially set our text to be white, but then when we hover on it, we'll do text green 700. And then we're transitioning our colors. We'll give it a quicker duration of 100 milliseconds, and then we'll center up the text. And let's take a look and see if we've got all that going. Cool, we do. And we can see that nice little transition as well. And if we were to click on this, we'll get a 404. Page cannot be found because it's not been built yet. All right, I'm not loving the rounded corners here. It doesn't match up with the hard edges of the select here. So let's get rid of that rounded. You can keep it if you want to, but I'm going to get rid of it. Everything else is looking fine. So I did mention before when we were talking about state that we have an image as well. So what we want to do is show the image of the park when it's selected. So when you select from here, not only should it update the and you might be noticing an issue. It should update the link, which it hasn't yet. You'll see it's Alcatraz Island selected, but we're still seeing Abraham Lincoln Birthplace link down below. So that's a problem we need to fix. But additionally, what we want to do is show that image of each park when they're selected. So when you select African American Civil War Memorial, it'll show the picture of that for us. So let's go ahead and get that set up. So in our header section, we've got our width full. We've got our flex call item center. We are going to, above the label here, create a div with an image. We'll do rounded on this image to make it look a little cleaner. We'll have our source equal to selected.image, and we'll have our alt equal to selected.title. And then for this, let's see if we're getting some stuff. All right, cool. So we've got our image. It's taking up the whole thing, but it's not changing yet. So we don't have anything to handle this select yet. So that's going to be the next thing that we want to set up. So flipping back over, on our select tag, we want to give an on change, and we'll call it handle change park, and then we'll create that function up above. So we'll do const handle change park. It's going to take in an event. And for this, we're going to set the park index to e.target.value. And let's console log that out to see what's going on. So if we open up our console, nothing yet, but if I switch, you can see 11, 5. So it's changing each time, which is good. Nothing is happening with our link or our picture, but we are updating the index, which is what we want. So what we're going to be doing with that index is actually updating our data. So we're starting off with the first item, but we're going to actually change this to a variable set to this park index. So we can get rid of the console log. In order for this to work, so we can actually set this. Let's do park index. And let's do park index. And so since the park index is already defined as 0, this should work, right? So if we refresh it, replace all is not a function. So this is actually another issue that's not related to what we're currently working on. So what's happening right now? Our project is looking for selected.title.replace all. But there's nothing defined here yet because our data hasn't loaded in. So let's go ahead and handle that first, and then we'll deal with the selection issue. So we're going to add another piece of state up top and call const is loading and set is loading. And if your terminal's freaking out, feel free to shut down your server for a second. We're going to set it initially to use state of true. And then up above where we have use state, we're going to use effect. And we're going to have a use effect. So we'll do use effect. And this function will run on the first render as well as anytime one of our dependencies in this array at the end changes. So we're going to watch parks, which is our prop coming in. And we're going to say if parks.data, then set is loading to false. So we're starting off with loading is true. And then once we get data, we'll set loading to false. So above our return statement, so that we're not running into this replace all thing down below, there it is. So that we're not running into that because our data is undefined. We'll have a catch where we say if is loading, then we can just return loading before we hit this return. And so now we've got our data, which is better, and we're not getting an error. So that's good. And we're still seeing our link, but the index, even though it's changing, is not updating our link or our image. And so now here we don't even have a URL. Okay, so let's refresh this. And we're actually going to utilize useEffect again. So above this, set is loading. We're going to add another useEffect. And that should be curly braces. And then our dependency array is going to watch park index. So whenever park index changes, this function inside is going to run. And we're just going to set selected to this. So we're just going to grab, whenever the park index changes, we're going to then update our image and our title reference with that park index. So now if we flip back over, now we can see our images changing, and you can see the links down below changing. Something that you might notice as well is that the height, so if you, like I just noticed it with the scroll bar, this image was a little bit bigger, this one was a little bit smaller, so we're getting some jumpiness. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So on our image div, we're going to give it a class of height 64, width 64, and overflow y hidden. And so now whenever I change it, it doesn't matter. The image is not taking up any extra space to then bump around this this select. Cool. So next, I mentioned using some open source fonts. So if you look, you can of course do Google fonts, or you can just search for fonts on your own. But on dafont.com, I saw this Dylan font. I actually looked at Netlify's site, and I saw that they were using this. And so for a lot of these fonts, they are free for personal use. So if you're just doing this on a project, it's typically cool. If you want to use it to, for a business idea or something, then a lot of times they'll have information like this where you throw them a couple bucks and then use their font. So if you download this, and I've already downloaded, so it's giving me that, but you'll extract that file. And then if you just drop it into your public, so I'm going to grab mine, made Dylan OTF. So this is our text file. We're going to use this font locally. So now in our index.css, up at the top, we're going to do @FontFace. Say font family is made Dylan. Our source is going to be equal to the URL /made_Dylan.otf. And then our font weight. Oh, this needs to be a semicolon. Font weight of 900. And then under our base styles, we'll do H1, H2, H3, and then anchor tags are all going to use that font family of made Dylan. And then the fallback could just be cursive. And we'll give it a line height of 1. And line height with a number without any units at the end just means it's a multiplier of whatever the font size is. So if the font size is 16, the line height is going to be, the font size is 16 pixels, the line height is going to be 16 pixels because 16 times 1 is 16. So then for our sizes, just to keep some consistency, we'll do font size of 3.6 rem. For our H2, let's do font size of 2.6 rem. And then for our H3, we can do font size of 2 rem. 2 rem without an L at the end. All right, so flipping back to our, cool. So that's already looking a little bit nicer and more customized. So now let's continue styling a little bit more. If we flip back over to our code, we can close out index CSS. We can actually get rid of global CSS as well. Don't need that. And so in our index, we've got our image, we've got our select, we're handling our changes. So it's updating the images, it's updating the link that's coming in. Something that I mentioned before is that this is only showing us 50 and it's only showing us A through B. So in order to kind of manage this a little bit, what I want to do is filter by designation to populate this, this select tag. So what we're going to do is down below, we're going to set a limit, and we're going to up that limit to 500. So we're going to grab all of the parks, but then instead of having a huge drop down of 500, what we'll do in here is we'll cut this return, and we'll say if park.designation, and this is another property that comes in on that data object, if park.designation equals national park, then we'll return this option with the name. And so now we should see all of our national parks. Let's refresh this. And you could see that little flash of loading at the top there for just a second. But now we've got all of our national parks. And if I click Bryce Canyon, down below you can see the link. There's our image. So obviously there are some adjustments that we could potentially make here to make that image look a little bit better. But for now, it is definitely working. So that's good. So next, flipping back over, we've got our link. Let's go ahead and make this look a little bit cleaner by putting this onto a card. So we have our div with our image, and then we have this label and select. So inside of the width 1/2, let's grab this div, label select, and link. So we're going to grab the link, we're going to grab the select, we're going to grab the label, and we're going to grab the div. We're going to cut that. So right now we just have the 1/2, the left half of our project. We're going to create another div and paste it back in. And so on this div, what we're going to do is give it a class name, and we'll do border to border gray and a padding of 8. And let's see what that looks like. All right, so that's kind of cool. We've got a little card sort of thing going on. We're obviously getting some issues with this this top section, but we'll come back to that. So let's make this look even cooler, potentially, with a little Tailwind customization. So something that you can do is extend the base styles of Tailwind. And so what we're going to do is, in this theme, we're going to open up an object, box shadow, and then give a comma. And then we're going to do default is equal to 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 4A5568. And then I'm going to copy this and paste, 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 and get rid of this last comma. And then I'm going to do 2, 2, 3, 3, and 4, 4. And hit save. And then if I flip back over to the index file, I'm going to give this our custom made box shadow. So now we can see it's kind of got this sharp, like 3D box looking thing. So with Tailwind, in that Tailwind config, we can make customized styles. So like, for example, if I put in shadow 2XL, this is one of the default Tailwind box shadows. And looks like it didn't pop up. Let's see. Shadow, let's just try shadow XL. Oh, the reason why is because I didn't include the rest of those in the Tailwind config. So this is something to keep in mind, is now it only has the default. So what we can do is I'll just grab the rest from Tailwind. So this is just on, if you just check out their box shadow API down below, and then they've got a small and an extra small. So now we're essentially defining the entire box shadow tree here. So now if we flip back to index and shadow XL, so you can see there's this kind of like faint shadow, and it doesn't fit with our like hard corners here as well. It's definitely a cool effect, but if you want to customize it a little bit more, you can tweak with that Tailwind config. And so now we've got our box shadow. So that looks kind of cool. All right, the last thing that I want to do, or the last couple of things, is A, fix this top section, and then B, do something with this right half of the page. So let's take care of those couple things. In our index first, so nav is looking good. We want to give our header some padding. So we'll do 24. Okay, nothing is fixed there just yet. H1 we can do, we don't need that red color. We'll do margin bottom of 12. Let's actually give this a container class as well. So this is going to give us a max width. So this is one of the utilities that Tailwind provides, is this container class. Okay, so Find your adventure is gone. Let's go ahead and find that. Let's give a vertical margin. Okay, so it's coming down a little bit. Let's bring it down a little bit more. So let's do margin bottom of 12 and margin top of 24. Okay, we still need a little bit more. Let's do margin bottom of 36. Margin top, excuse me. 32. 36 was not an option. Okay, cool. So this is looking better. We've got our card on the left. We've got our title up here, and now on the right. So something else that's cool to work with, this site called Undraw. And with Undraw, they've got tons of different open source options that you're able to use. And one thing that I really like is that you can utilize this color picker. I put in the hex code 2F855A to match that text green 700 color that we've been using throughout so far. And so it'll update all of your, you can see like if you play with it now, these are kind of this purplish color or red or yellow or whatever you want them to be. So I've already imported a couple of files. All you need to do is, click on an image, download that SVG. And then once you do, in your public folder, just drag in the image. So I'm going to use one called, that I renamed to Navigator. And you can see this SVG. So here we've got our half width div. Beneath that, we're going to make one more div. We're going to give it a class name of width 1/2. Give it a display flex, items, center, justify center. And then our image class name is going to be width full. And the source is going to be equal to /navigator.svg. So with Next, you're able to access this public directory by just putting / and then the route to your file. So since this is kind of a smaller project and I don't anticipate a ton of static assets, I think this is fine to just throw them in here for now like this. But if you wanted to keep it a little bit more organized, you could do something like, fonts and images or something like that. However you want to do it is totally fine. But for this project, like I said, it's not going to be huge, so I don't think we need all of that. So if we flip back over to our project, cool. That's starting to look like a decent little home page. We've got our selection. We've got the images updating. We've got a nice little image on the right. We've got our headline at the top. So this is starting to look better. In the next video, what we're going to do is style out our template so that when you click on one of these, or when you select one of these parks and click on Let's Go, it'll show you some details about that individual national park. But for now, with this video, we've got some foundation with Tailwind. We can do some more styling. Moving forward, we'll work on using Tailwind as a responsive design tool as well and continue styling up our site. So thanks for hanging out, and I will see you in the next one.